creativity in the arts and dementia research. The seminars are presented by the University of West of Scotland, School of Health and Life Sciences, Division of Mental Health and Integrated Practice, and Alzheimer's Scotland Centre for Policy and Practice, in collaboration with Alzheimer's Scotland and the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. My name is Hamish Fulford. I'm a lecturer within the Department of Mental Health and Integrated Practice here at UWS, and I'm here today to introduce the second seminar in the series as one of the lecturing team that supported the doctoral students in their organisation and planning of this seminar series. As I said, today's the second of 3 exciting seminars and workshops held over the winter, with the next and final one in January. The events feature a late morning seminar about the different ways in which arts and the creative approaches are being used in research with people with dementia, followed by an interactive, friendly workshop. The workshop will explore the theme of the seminar. All we require is your unique presence and way of looking at the world this afternoon. You can partake as much or as little as you like, depending on how you feel today. This morning's seminar is being delivered by LcLennan. Liv is a musician and co-director of Music for Wellbeing, a CIC specialising in community and participatory music making for people with long-term health conditions, particularly dementia and respiratory conditions, learning disabilities, and intergenerational projects. She's a part-time doctoral student at Guildhall School of Music and Drama, researching intergenerational music making in care homes through her own community music practice. After the seminar and lunchtime break, you're invited to return at 1 p.m. to a workshop offering the opportunity to explore further what Liv discusses this morning. I'm not going to say too much more, as you'll hear all about it in Liv's seminar and workshop today. I do, however, very much hope you enjoyed today's sessions, and it would be great to see you back again for the final one next month. We'll be recording this morning's session, and please feel free to screen grab or take pictures as Liv discusses her seminar. For those that don't want recorded, please turn off your video. The link for the workshop this afternoon will be the same one that was sent to you all previously. I'd now like to introduce you to Liv. Over to you, Liv, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Hamish. Thank you. I'm going to do the Zoom thing. I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you should all be able to see the presentation. Good, we've got some thumbs up, and you can still hear me. Good. Well, I hope it's good anyway. So thank you, Hamish. Thank you for introducing me. My name is Liv, and a huge welcome to you all today, and I'm delighted that so many of you are interested in intergenerational music making in care homes. So firstly, I'd just like to thank the University of the West of Scotland for organising this wonderful seminar series and giving me the opportunity to be part of it. The support and attention to detail that's all gone into it all is wonderful. I'd also just like to thank my supervisors, Dr. Stuart Wood, Alex Momakides and Joe Gibson, and the Guildhall School of Music and Drama for believing in me and that I can actually do this kind of thing too. And also just like to mention my wonderful colleagues, Angela and Carol, they're fellow doctoral students, and they'll be leading the workshop this afternoon, so do come back later for that. So, who am I? What do I do? As you've already heard, I'm Liv. I'm a community musician researching intergenerational music in care homes. And as a performing musician, I play the cello and the Highland bagpipes, but tend to use a lot of voice and movement, ukulele and hand percussion in my community music work. So I'm going to be giving a brief overview of how I situate my own practice and the pilot project that I carried out in 2019, so pre-COVID, the research methods I'm using, some early findings and realisations, and then some thoughts on what is going to come next for me. So, community music, what is it? Now, I appreciate that we've got some community musicians with us here today, and I certainly don't see myself as speaking for them or their practice, or even representing the whole of the community music sector. So my understanding comes from my own practice, and that's informed by my training and my development and my doctoral studies. So I like to think of community music like a box of Lego that's been kind of tipped out onto the floor. And my daughter did that just the other day, actually. So we have beautiful colours, we have maybe endless possibilities and full of potential to build something magnificent. So the individual pieces are representing all the different elements that we have to consider in our practice and something that we have to shape into something else. But when you're walking through that Lego, that room of Lego, just putting one foot wrong can be incredibly painful. So even if, I'm across two screens and sometimes it doesn't, there we go. It doesn't like me. So even if every project has the same pieces of Lego, it's unlikely that we'd be able to create the same product each time. I mean, who remembers where all those small pieces go anyway? So we can build and rebuild. And for me, that is the beauty of community music. So don't panic, there aren't that many quotes in this presentation, but I just wanted to provide a small bit of context for community music in general. Now, community music isn't just about getting together for a jam session, and it's not socially engaged in the way ensembles maybe performing in care homes might view their own practice. It is a musical practice that's an active intervention between a music leader or facilitator and participants. Now, viewing it as an intervention doesn't mean that we force it on people. And a word I might like to use is perhaps intentional. It's an intentional, inviting practice that people can choose to participate in or not. So ideally, we're not hanging around care home lounges ready to shove maracas in people's hands, although I do often see that sometimes. So anyway, community music enjoys a long tradition, and particularly in England and Ireland, are now really enjoying a wonderful international tradition too, and it's related to the community arts movement more broadly. It's an ambiguous practice, it's contextual, it's situated, and it's probably easier to describe underpinning features rather than the musical practices that we do or that we engage in. So I've been considering quite deeply different ways of approaching and visualising my own practice, and shapes being how I'm understanding it currently. So firstly, we have the circle, and how the circle can carry a lot of symbolism, not just for me, but in general, across times, across religions, cultures and practices. And it can represent concepts like wholeness and unity, completion, democracy, love, and eternalism. It's quite a traditional shape for many dance cultures around the world, and a shape of connection and inclusion. For me, it's got personal significance, and even before I became a community musician, I played in pipe bands, we compete in circles, we sometimes perform in circles with our backs to the audience, but we're connected to each other musically through that. And even at my own wedding, we had circular tables dotted around the room with myself and my husband and families in the middle. So it's kind of part of my whole being, really. And also I lead and I train others in circle dance for people with dementia. So it's a huge part of my life. Not necessarily through choice either, it's just happened to be like that. And of course, the shape I most use in my own community music practice is the circle. So hopefully you can see that a little bit more clearly now. So in Lee Higgins and Lee Williams' book called Engaging in Community Music, they've presented these particular foundational principles they've arranged them in a circle, represented by circles around a circle. So it's obviously a theme that comes through in community music practice. And they kind of use this to provide a framework for understanding community music. And they've done some excellent work on inviting us to consider how these principles might be woven into the context that we work in. So rather than providing a bank of activities or tasks to do. And in my own doctoral practice research, I'm particularly interested in the lifelong learning and the intergenerational aspect, the activism and the social justice and acts of hospitality, and also offer an extension to the culture of inquiry to say that yes, research does inform practices, but I think practice does inform the research as well. It's a two-way street. So even though all these elements might be important to us, certain principles are going to be more important at different times and in different combinations, in the different projects, in different contexts, with the different people that we all work with at different stages of our career. And that's just a way for me to envisage that and to show that things might be to the fore at one point, but not at the next stage. And then moving on to the triangle. The triangle helps me envisage my own way of perceiving all the kind of fundamental and important elements of my practice and how they're all interrelated. It's an equilateral triangle, kind of, and there's no I tried to make a GIF that meant it spin round, but Prezi wasn't really favourable to that. So imagine it's an equilateral triangle that kind of spins around, and there's a different element at the top, and different importance being given to all of those at one time. So it used to be just two. It used to be power and personhood, but I've added in relational to that because I see humans as relational beings and music making as a relational practice. So anyone that's working in the field of dementia care will obviously be aware of Kitwood's work and this model here, so I'm not going to labour the point. But actually, although he's describing the psychological needs of people with dementia, I think this actually holds true for many of us. And I do carry these concepts around with me throughout my personal as well as professional life. I think we all need love. We all need attachment and inclusion and things to do. And being a community musician for me is actually an expression of something deeper and not just about making great music with people. So in terms of my relational concept, as I said, community music is a relational practice and it doesn't happen in a vacuum or in a silo. And what I mean by this is that within our workshops, we're relating to each other, we're relating to the environment and the space, and relating to the music itself, whether that's the act of music making or actually the product of music that we are creating. So for me, the individual is always in relation to the collective, and that includes myself. And there's a wonderful concept of Ubuntu, which is an Nguni Bantu term, essentially meaning humanity. And it's understood by different names in different languages across a wide variety of African cultures, but essentially embodies sharing, kindness, and is about connection. And I quite like the communitarian approach of the connection between the individual and the society or the community, and that the social identity and personality of a person are often shaped by these relations. And it can be beautifully summarised by the Kenyan-born scholar John Samuel Mbiti. I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. And then one of my interests might be democracy, and I mentioned it could be a democratic space, the circle, but I particularly like Tony Benn's 5 questions on democracy. And they kind of underpin my intention to either give away power or at least share it as much as possible or empower others. So the community musician's kind of dream is to do ourselves out of a job. The fact that we can pass on skills and confidence and knowledge to people who wouldn't usually consider themselves musicians, and then for them to be able to comfortably consider themselves as such. It's not necessarily the best business model, but I'd say it's one of the kind of better social models that we might use. And I also think about power in relation to institutions that I work in as well, situating myself and my practice as a gentle disruptor of systems, and acknowledging that I do work within these institutions and I'm in them, but I try not to be of them. So very briefly, I mean, I could talk for days on practice research, or we could discuss it, I'm sure, but moving on to it and how I understand it from this project and for me at this time. As a community music practice researcher, it's all about researching aspects of my own practice, and practice research will look very different depending on who's carrying it out. There have been loads of debates around whether the term should be research-led practice, practice-led research, practice as research, practice-based research. But actually, I think practice research is probably a better, kind of more inclusive and all-encompassing term, and allows for nuance within all of that. And community music practice research for me is partly about melding a kind of participatory artistic practice as performance, so blurring the lines between process and performance as two separate entities. And I used to come down really heavily on the side of kind of process and thinking that's what I'm all about, but I kind of been more recently viewing that as, or process as, a performance in itself. So it's not about performance in terms of technical perfection, if we're using a traditional way of understanding musical performance, but actually acknowledging the performative and aesthetic choices that we make in this work, in this facilitation work, and shifting the focus away from an end performance product, viewing the whole process as a performance in itself. So for me, practice research does share similarities with action research in the fact that community music's reflective, and it's constantly reflective, changing aspects in a broadly cyclical way, but it probably is kind of less overt or conscious cycles of action. So within this framework, we are kind of constantly aware of ourselves and the obvious challenges that this can bring in terms of bias or becoming emotionally attached or involved with the research. But we also are kind of moving towards being okay with dispensing this notion of objectivity. So we're not working in a positivist paradigm. It's an arts and practice-based kind of research paradigm, and it's contextual, it's situated, and therefore it's personal. So I'm going to take you now to the project and explain a little bit more about what I'm doing. So what am I researching? What am I actually doing? I ask myself that quite a lot, to be fair. So essentially I'm researching intergenerational music or musicking in care homes through the practice itself. I'm investigating my own practice and pedagogy of community music, which I'm viewing now as a social, spatial and musical practice through intergenerational musicking in a specific place. And then hopefully I'll also be raising questions and challenges, not just for myself, but for the wider field too. So thinking about the project, you can do it. I do like a pun. So originally this pilot project wasn't intended as a research project. My community interest company had some ukuleles donated through Music for All, and we just wanted to test out a concept of intergenerational learning, obviously through ukulele learning. So we didn't have any kind of preconceived ideas of what that might look like, very much a trial project. We kind of capitalised on that in terms of the research. Like, well, it's here, it's going to happen, we may as well try and research what is going on. It was a primary school situated in a place, and it was an after school club where the children came with their parents, and I find that quite important actually in terms of connecting people and having support for the children. And it was funded by the local council area board, the practical delivery, I should say. So I thought ukes or ukuleles could be inclusive, and the aim was only to ever teach a few simple chords, and we can use them in an open-tuned way. So you just strum them and they make a particularly pre-tuned chord. So I thought maybe that's inclusive, you know, we can all strum our thumbs across it. And I thought I could balance the group okay with just me really facilitating, but with other staff support in the care home. I'm fairly used to doing that as a practitioner and in intergenerational contexts as well. But there were quite a few challenges, raising lots of different questions, not just about the practice, but about the very point of actually working in care homes and whether it was actually all worth it anyway. So thinking about my question, this is my question at the moment, and I like a lot of it, but I don't think it's quite the right one yet, and I think the right one will emerge towards the end of well, when I have to kind of submit my upgrade, that will force me to make a question. But I do still think it's important to be able to describe and illuminate aspects of intergenerational music making, especially as there's been quite a boom in the last 4 or 5 years in the practice of it, and there's been television programmes made and lots written, and I don't think the research has quite kept up with that. But yes, thinking about social order and what that might mean and how you can change it or not during the practice. So thinking about what happens and the implications for the wider field of community music. So the kinds of research methods that I'm using, I mean, obviously the practice and the documentation that always goes with my practice. So I've got the session plans and reflections, and created a toolkit, which I'll show you in a bit. We had some feedback forms for participants and encouraged people to draw pictures as reflections, and then also using video and video analysis too, and that captured the music that we created. So you can see here, I won't go too closely, my written, typed up session plan. I never really stick to it, but I need to kind of go through that planning process to be able to kind of get it out and kind of out there. And I just use that as a framework to respond in the moment. So having those and my written scribbles afterwards, my reflections on my practice, there's a picture of me just doing the practice. And a lot of the time we know kind of what to do before we consciously think about it. So I think acknowledging that is a good thing. And then, there we go. I had a practice, you can't really see too much, but a kind of practice journal there. That was just me flicking through it. A research journal that I scribbled some kind of wider thoughts in and reflections, and trying to make it relate to research as well. I then produced a four lesson toolkit. So that was based on each weekly session, and I kind of summarised that for people, the chords we did, the songs, gave them ideas for kind of further exploration or learning if they wanted to do that. I don't think they did, to be honest. I think they were quite happy just to turn up. And then we have the feedback forms there, and you can see in the middle, hopefully, I asked children to draw a picture of their favourite part of the session and let us know what they said about the project and to whom. And then on the outside, they are feedback forms given out at the end and kind of included prompt sentences and speech bubbles, such as I attended the project because, and the thing that most surprised me was just to encourage participants to reflect a bit on their experiences. And then we did some video analysis as well. So this, as well as the practice, for me, this is kind of the main chunk of the methods, the method bit that I'm using. So you can see I drew things, I wrote things that I'm doing kind of timestamps for, and particular moments too. Now I'm just going to show you what I filmed. So we should come out here. So I was saying earlier, I defied Prezi. I tried to embed the videos, but it still doesn't quite work in the same way. So you should be able to see this video. Here we go. So it's obviously a sped up video. And what I did was filmed each session starting from before the participants started to arrive, and then filmed obviously during the actual session and then as they left the space. So I was making notes, just describing what happened. And then obviously the video is from a certain angle. So I took snapshots and drew a kind of bird's eye view of some of the spaces or the spatial formations that were going on. And then if there were any scenes that I particularly liked, I would do a still, but then kind of draw it in my notes. Okay, we'll go back to the presentation. So for example here, we've got the drugs round coming in and just the way the drugs round obscures what's going on. And there's a way that care homes always find of kind of putting their mark on your session. That's not a bad thing. Okay. So I'm not quite at the stage of emergent findings just yet, maybe next term. But there have been lots of kind of realizations and reflections and interesting things that have emerged so far in this process. So the first being that although I think some of my research methods are fine and they're working well, but some of them, so such as encouraging people to fill in feedback forms or draw pictures, didn't really elicit anything that useful or interesting. It's fine, but I think there could be better ways, but I think they would need a lot more time to prepare and plan and analyse. As I said, it wasn't a research project, it wasn't planned as a research project at first, so we were moving within the timescales that we had. So if I do another practical project, then that would be a huge consideration in the future. But the biggest kind of question for me is around the use of the circle. So I was waxing lyrical earlier about the circle being a timeless, democratic, unifying, almost utopian space. But this project has kind of flipped that on its head a little bit for me, which is disconcerting. And I'm learning to kind of live with that and my practice, and the things I took for granted before aren't there anymore. But that's a good thing, 'cause that's how we develop. But also my use of space and my body in that space can also have a huge effect on people's participation. I've also learned that no is really powerful and really positive in certain situations too. And sounds within the environment can interact with each other in really interesting and surprising ways. So if we think about the circle, so, as I've just said, the circle's used a lot in my practice, and for me it's about proposing a kind of possible alternative social order. So a vision of what could be in our societies, in our communities, a kind of utopia as method, almost. And I'd never really questioned it before, but just watching those videos and even just experiencing the project itself, it became quite clear to me that it could be considered more of a method of surveillance. So whether that was the participants arranging themselves into their own territories or just looking at each other across the circle, or when I travelled around the circle supporting learners with their ukulele learning, it kind of felt more like a panopticon. So we've got Bentham's Tower in the middle there, and that kind of felt like me. That's what I was doing, just watching everyone. And I wasn't monitoring them. It was only ever a good intention I had, but it's kind of turned into something a little bit more challenging. And I would only ever want to be supportive and encouraging to people. So yeah, people's behaviour changed when they noticed my gaze. So that I hadn't really come across that too much before, and I haven't worked out whether that's solely in intergenerational musicking or in this space, or whether that's the whole of my practice. So it's something that I'm constantly thinking about and considering. So the second thing I mentioned about the body, and I've been reimagining community music as a spatialised practice. And again, I'd always thought about the environment that we're in, but I'd never thought about my own use of myself and my body as a space, or as a map, or however you want to describe it. So I've been drawing pictures and recording how the groups are forming, I should say, and how we move around the space in different ways. So the videos show a particular angle, and I'm presenting a bird's eye view of certain moments in the workshop. So I've gone from kind of putting participants as little blobs there, I'm such a terrible drawer, and stick men and that kind of thing, and showing the direction, to hopefully I can come back, there we go, to then presenting them as kind of bigger forms and groups there. So it's still tying in that notion of Ubuntu and the individual interacting with the community or the society. They've become even more blob-like, but blobs all melding together like almost plasticine or Play-Doh. I've also explored the use of stop-motion videos in the form of Playmobil as well, which has been really fun to do. And this is kind of an amalgam of different moments that I've recorded. Hopefully you can see what's going. So how the circle is quite static and there's lots of space in there, and I'm kind of moving around, and then there's the member of the care staff on the outside also moving around. I'll play that again so you can just have a look. And again, how some of the care staff are in the room, but they're not of the workshop there. Okay. So being able to say no is a really positive, I think, element of what I enable in my practice. And as a leader, as a facilitator, we say yes quite a lot, but it has to be balanced out, I think, somehow. So then I think the power, when people can say no, the power resides with the participants. And as we're also about to find out, it can also support a change in perception from a care staff. So we'll start with Terry. There we go. So Terry here, he's clearly saying no. It's a bit hard to see, but he's saying no to working in a small group at this stage. His ukulele is down on the floor and he's taking time to have a drink. So I'm just checking in with him to see if he's okay. And he is. That's fine. In the second picture, there we go. In the second picture, there we go. He's more physically removed because we're recording a piece that we've just created, but he didn't want to sit with his own group there. And again, I'm just checking he's okay, and he is. And as a leader, I'm perfectly fine with all of this. It's not just my job to kind of force people to participate in the way I think they should, not at all. And I think my job is actually to give a welcoming, accepting space, enabling all sorts of expression. His mum was there, and I think she probably felt a little bit annoyed and maybe embarrassed by him at this moment. She also understood that it was no problem for me whatsoever. And if you've, as a parent myself, even though I know it's fine when your child refuses to take part, you still get that kind of social anxiety, like, is this okay? But I think as a leader, hopefully I did my best to alleviate any concerns of hers. So in the end, this acceptance, I think, paid off, because we have him in the final session. He's up with the ukulele band that joined us in the last session and singing along to George Ezra's Shotgun. And his mum actually mentioned to me afterwards that Terry wouldn't have done anything like that before the project, so he felt able to do that. And for me, that's, you know, what I'm here for, really. Okay, then we have Norma here. I'm just going to play you this video of Norma. And for context, I'm asking the group who would like to sing a particular part in a simple 2-part song we've been learning. I asked Norma, and I think she interpreted it as an invitation to do a solo. And she's very clear in her reaction to this. Not me, she says. I do not want to sing. I'm just going to play this again, and I'm going to invite you to just notice the reaction of the two carers, the care staff, and they are situated on the edge of the video, but just watch their reaction. Would you like to sing that? Not you. Not me. But you can sing really well. So hopefully you noticed their faces, and actually from what I understand, this was the most clear that Norma had been for a very long time. So I offered her, and she received it as an invitation of something she really did not want to do, and she let us know how she felt. But it also gave the care staff the opportunity to see her differently in that moment as well. So even though it's not necessarily something, you know, it wasn't the greatest outcome in terms of encouraging her to sing, but in terms of her being able to express herself and to change the relationships between people, I think that was a huge moment. So moving on to kind of the environment and Room and Spoon, and this piece happened spontaneously during the welcome song in session 3. The relationship manager, who also attended most of the sessions, so he was preparing some teas and coffees for us all, and there were lots of different background noises going on around us. So when I was going through the videos again on the second viewing, I noticed how the sounds in the room came together at a certain point and interacted beautifully. It doesn't often happen. Normally there's alarms or beeps or, you know, chairs scraping, but this was just one of those moments, and I just found that really interesting. So you've got the notes. This was my transcription, and I do use notation for myself sometimes, but you know, that's directly from my notes. I haven't beautified it, I haven't typed it up. This is just what I'm kind of using in my notes. So being a community musician, I can't let us get away with not doing something in the session. Obviously it's up to you whether you join in, but I'm going to invite you to do that. So if we were in a room together, we'd try playing this piece, perhaps using different instruments or dividing it into different groups and maybe doing some improvising over the top. But we're all in our little Zoom boxes, in our kind of box rooms as well. So we're just going to try it ourselves using our own bodies. So I'll invite you to stand if you want, or just come forwards in your chair a little bit. And we're just, if you can hear, I'm just trying to keep the pulse with my feet. 2, 3, 4. So I invite you to do that with me. Okay, I'm going to take you, so that's the pulse of the piece. I'm going to take you through the spoon part now. I'll break it down. I'll play it through and then break it down. Okay, so first bit, we're going to play 3, 4, 1. Just try that. 3, 4, 1. Cool, very nice. I can see a few of you got great rhythm. And then the next bar goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Let's try that. 3, 4, and. 2, 3, 4, and. We'll put those together. So after 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And good. And the next little bit goes 3, 4, and 1, 2, and. Let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and. And again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and. Okay, whole thing together. I'll loop it a few times and just join in when you've got it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2. Good. Welcome, welcome, Margaret. Angela. I messed that up. Welcome, welcome, Paulina. Welcome, welcome, Mrs. Wakeman. There we go. Well done, everyone. So it just came together at that time. And by sharing it like this, we can see that kind of spontaneous pieces occur. Sometimes they get messed up and they can be translated into different ways of understanding it as well. So hopefully we've got a fuller understanding of Room and Spoon and how the Room and Spoon was interacting through transferring it to our own bodies. So finally, what happens next? How on earth am I going to bag it all up together? So obviously I've got to complete the video analysis and finalise the themes from there, and I'll choose some moments to drill down into based on this kind of more iterative process. We might be doing more Rooms and Spoons, who knows. And I'm thinking about the ways that I'm kind of using to understand everything. So the Playmobil has been great, actually. It's been a really fun way to do it when sitting at a desk gets too much. And kind of experiencing that movement in a different way. I've started to make some musical notes using my cello, but for me that's quite new at the moment, and I'm not sure whether that was just something that I needed to do recently or whether that's something I can take forward. I also need to delve a little bit more deeply into the musical aspects of the practice and thinking about the music we've produced and created and what those implications are. And then of course beyond my upgrade, which is due kind of May time, working in care homes right now is kind of, in a truly meaningful way, kind of feels impossible with COVID. Even when we have vaccines and everything, I think we've kind of changed quite a lot and for quite a long time in the future. So I need to think about whether I want to do a practical musicking project, or whether that's online, maybe digitised, or perhaps think about other ways that we can try and bring people together. But what I do know is that if people can't even see their families right now, I do suspect these kinds of projects are probably low down the list of priorities. I also know that COVID's highlighted the isolation of care homes and residents of care homes from their wider community even more. And we need actual bold, radical and brave ideas to address these issues. So I am going to leave you with the group singing Aloha Oi. So this was from our final piece of the final session. It brought together participants of the ukulele project, so a local ukulele band, and my local Singing for Lung Health group. Now Aloha Oi was written by the Hawaiian princess Lili Ukalani, and in about 1878. Essentially it means farewell to thee or love to you, and then ends with the English words until we meet again. And actually little did I know how resonant those words would become. Thank you.
Liv, that was fabulous. Thank you very much indeed. I was really struck by the power issue. That really struck me, that people being empowered to say no, because we see so much of care where people maybe they don't actually say no or yes, they just go along with whatever other people would want them to do. And it's that active no I found really interesting. Did you think it made a difference? You talked about the external practitioners, the people walking around and seeing that. How much notice did they take?
In the moment, or do you mean all afterwards, or?
Well, I think you're right. There's two parts to that, isn't there? There's what happens in the moment, and does it have an impact beyond the moment?
Yeah, I think people did notice it. Yeah, I mean, what I noticed more is when people were situating themselves outside the circle and noticing the no moments, and I might have kind of asked them, oh, can you just see if they're okay and try and support them to take part if they want. It became like a task for them to do, and it was I'm okay now, but when I was watching it quite early on, it was quite upsetting, and the way the care home residents were spoken to, and why aren't you participating, like they were a child at school, which also they shouldn't really be spoken to like that. So yeah, but when what I noticed when care staff were taking part in the sessions, and they had their ukuleles too, they noticed it more and became more, I suppose, part of the whole and understanding. And yeah, as you saw the care staff's reaction there, they were, oh my goodness. I don't know about the impact beyond that, to be honest. I can't really speak to that. Because then that's one of the issues about these kinds of projects. They're time limited, and you can try and stay in touch, but you know, it's hard and people move on and have different priorities. So yeah, that's part of the consideration going forward with the research, is that actually it probably you need to be situated in a care home for longer, over a longer period of time, to really notice those impacts, you know, the longevity of them.
I think that would be a really interesting one, Liv, because I think there is something needs done about that. I'm going to open for questions now until 12 o'clock. So if you want to speak to Liv, could you do the wee hand up, or just put your hand up and I'll try and see faces. So is it thoughts, comments, not necessarily questions? Pamela, lovely to see you here today, hen. Mind and take your mute off before you ask.
Just about failed intelligence test there. It was just, I really enjoyed watching the staff members, you know, seeing what people within the care homes are capable of. I think that's probably one of the things, you know, today watching that, it's really important what you've achieved, because you're actually seeing people using a medium, whether that's music, it's music with yourself, or any other medium, to actually express what they want, whether that is a negative or a positive, that I don't want to participate, or yes, I do. And I think your wee video really showed that very clearly. So I really enjoyed your presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pamela. I'm honestly not good at monitoring that chat box, guys. So if you can put your hands up, it would make life easier for me. Stuart.
Thanks, Margaret. Well done, Liv. Thank you. That was really enjoyable. So, I mean, I know your work. So, full disclosure, I know what's a lot of what's going on. But I was really struck by your comment early on about being in the group and not of it, or your attitude to being a community musician at all is around being in a community or in a space, but not of it. And it made me think about that whole question of being an expert or not. And you know, when you are thinking of yourself as being part of a group, part of a circle, but also you've been given that kind of expert persona somehow. And along with that expert persona comes obligations about safekeeping and things like that. I just wonder, can you talk a little bit about how that lands for you, being an expert, not being an expert, being responsible, being the same?
Yeah, so I suppose I was talking more about being being part of an institution rather than a group. I think I'm always part of a group, and you move between different roles within that. I think sometimes there's discourse and discussions around that kind of expert role. And I don't necessarily position myself as an expert, but I suppose I position myself as someone who has skills to give and pass on and to share with people. And there might be others in the group that have the same. So yeah, it's that process of saying, well, this is me, this is what I can offer. What have we got here? Thinking about the assets of the group and what we can create together. So co-creation is something that's bandied around. I'm not a huge fan of the term, stuff like that, but I just prefer the term making music with people, or musicking with people, or just being with people. Yeah, I don't know what else to say really. It's something I think we have to be quite okay with, in situating ourselves as someone who does know what we're doing, but recognising that there are others there and other perspectives on that too. So it's not putting ourselves on an expert pedestal or anything, but it's about acknowledging that we have a role within that, if we're going in as a facilitator, and we have a responsibility to the group, to the process, to the music that we're creating. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but
that sounds interesting, Liv, because I was thinking myself about that idea of power. Because I'm not a musician, so musicians frighten me a wee bit.
I hope I haven't, Margaret.
You kind of know more than me, and I wonder if you're in a care home and you might have dementia as well, if some of that is a bit, is really a challenge when you see somebody coming in who've got these skills that you don't have anymore at every level. It must feel quite powerless, even in daily life. Everybody seems to be more cognitively able than you. So I think I can see how that would be a real challenge.
Yes, and I suppose the whole point of it is that you have to try and work with people where they are, and to try and not create that differential of power. I'm sure we make assumptions as well, and they're not always proved right. And it is that's the essence of the practice, isn't it? Is to try and get rid of this elitism or the levels, and just try and work with people where they are. Yes. Absolutely. Yes, and I think part of the ukulele issue might have been that as well, that even though I thought it could be inclusive, and the act of just strumming strings would be fine for people, but I think the instrument in itself was probably a bit of more of a barrier than I'm used to, because I don't usually teach an instrument like that. I use different things. Yeah,
Carol?
Yeah, thanks, Liv. That was absolutely amazing. I've made hundreds of notes, so I shall revisit them afterwards. I've got a question about staff, and I've written it down to keep me on track. So how do you, or actually can you, invite the care staff? I'm really interested to understand if you can invite the care staff to be part of the process, part of the group, and do they also then become enablers? So just when you drew attention to the reactions that they had at that moment, and are they actually able to set aside sufficiently a sufficient amount of their professional role in order to do that? And the caveat,
all this.
if they don't or can't do that, do they then become a disruptor?
Okay, so I'll take. You might have to remind me, Carol.
Yeah. It's like an interview question, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, that's a research question. 79 parts. So the first bit was about them being part of the circle.
Yeah.
Part of the group. Yeah, I always try and encourage that. I mean, obviously they have roles within that and responsibilities as care staff, and they have to do that. But I do try and encourage them to be, access their inner musician as well. Why not? And how I try and set that up is having meetings with the care home and giving a lead in time so people can be prepped and stuff. but I'm sure anyone who's worked in a care home knows the challenges of that. And I'll say, I won't say much more. Sorry, I've totally forgotten the second.
Yeah, so if they are not able to sort of draw a demarcation line between their professional role and their being part of the activity or the process, do they then, it's almost that description that you used of that surveillance position of being in the middle of the circle, do they then take on that and become a disruptor of what's going on?
Some did, some didn't, is kind of the simple answer. And I think it depends on the person, how they view their role within that setting, whether they're there and they're just there to kind of, make sure, I don't know, Jean is hydrated enough or whatever, then that kind of, they have another task to do and don't really think too much about the music. But there are others. One particular carer, she had a son that came to the project and she was a carer at the home too, so she had all these roles going on, and she was actually incredible in how she engaged in that whole kind of workshop and project. So yes, I suppose is the answer, and then sometimes no to your question. So it's a very community music answer. It depends. It's ambiguous.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liv. Ambi.
It was really interesting, Liv. Thanks very much. And then definitely out with my range of knowledge. I mean, I'm like Margaret. I'm not musical, or I like music, but I can't do music. So it was interesting. But my educator hat came on, and I was really interested in when you talked about your role moving within the circle, and how that had, what influence that might have on participation and so on. And sorry about this, but again, I went back with my education head on, thinking about how I used to work the room when I would be doing teaching, training and education, and how I can't do that now because I'm doing everything online. And I wondered if you're doing stuff in the future, how that will be different for you, because you may not be able to do that either.
Yeah. So the stuff I'm doing at the minute online, it's mainly lung health stuff, but I did have a session recently with people with dementia, and that was with the Museum of London. So it's a different skill, and it's trying to keep your eye, you're still scanning the room and you're still trying to read what people are doing. You've got kind of less of a opportunity to do that with the boxes and everything that we're in. And it's just trying to engage people as much as possible. And I suppose you are still surveying, having that surveillance notion, hopefully gently. So it is possible, it's just different. And, for example, I've stood up today to, I suppose, not recreate, but to try to create that feeling that I'm in a workshop, and I don't like to sit down too much. So, just using those kind of techniques as well are things that you can do to bridge the gap between being in a room and being in a Zoom room.
I'm going to just, we need to bring it to a close, Liv, but I did have a thought there about Ambi's, that notion of the body, how our body is missing from this screen, and actually the body is really important, but I'll leave that one. Can we just thank Liv in the usual way by a bit of applause, if you don't mind, for our wonderful presentation. Thank you. Now, this is the first part of a two-part session, and so Liv has now finished her work, but I think you can all see on the screen Angela Gregory and Carol Begwith. So they're going to be leading our afternoon one, along with Gillian, and I don't know, she's not got her camera on, so you can see her name there. You will see her in the afternoon if she's too shy just now. The afternoon session, oh, you're there. Hello, Hen. So we hope you'll come back this afternoon for the afternoon session, because it will be a very enriching experience based on your morning's learning. And we want you to come along and just come along and enjoy what we're going to do with you. Be good fun. A wee teaser. Don't go missing. Please go for lunch now. I'd like to take you for lunch, can't do that, but please go for lunch and come back at 1 o'clock on the same Zoom link, just back on the same one, and we'll have a bit of pleasure and embodiment and fun in the afternoon. So take care, guys, and we'll see you very soon.
Right.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Yeah. Bye, Helen. Okay, guys. Well done.
Liv. Yeah, very good. Well done.
Well done, Liv.
Well done. And you managed all those technical things really well.
Yeah.
Hardly